eyes burning, throat stinging, lungs tightening. That's what it felt like to walk through certain areas of downtown Portland on any given night last year as police fired tear gas at protesters. But what happened after those initial effects wore off?
Headaches, gastrointestinal issues for people, brain fog, fatigue, and then, of course, the reports of menstrual changes.
And we're not just talking about the people marching in the streets and clashing with police, but also those living nearby.
This tear gas was so prevalent in our neighborhood. I eventually had to move because of that, because it was making me so sick.
Here's the story.
Some interesting coverage tonight. Interesting stuff. I want to hear from you. Of course, right? I want to hear what you think about this. We're getting into the tear gas topic tonight. So please, all the ways at the bottom of your screen right now, that's how you reach out to us. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. And as always, use Twitter and the hashtag #HeyDan. Let's get started. And we are going to start with the big story. Tear gas and what it does to your body. I want you to think back, all right? Think back to last spring, to last summer, when something abnormal became very normal in Portland. For months, on many nights, protests, demonstrations, riots, they ended in a cloud of tear gas. Portland police used it more than 100 times last year, although they haven't used it since last August. Federal agents still do use it to this day, often outside of the ICE building in the South Waterfront. And often the gas, when tear gas is used, it wafts into neighborhoods with homes and with families. Have you ever wondered how that affected people? The people living in those communities, breathing that in night after night? I did. And Portland researchers did too. They studied what tear gas was doing to people in Portland. All ages, all health conditions, what was it doing to them? Kristen Severance explains that many of the people they found with symptoms never even went to a protest.
Tear gas, or CS gas, was sprayed in downtown Portland in front of the Justice Center, Union Building, and in neighborhoods for months following the death of George Floyd. Portland police officers used it nearly 100 times from the end of May to July 4th, and then ordered to only use it after declaring a riot. Federal agents used CS gas nearly every night for several weeks last summer and continue to use it at protests in front of the ICE building. Both agencies said they used the gas to disperse crowds or stop violence. Thousands of people in Portland breathed in the gas over the last year, and many of those people never went to a protest, but lived or worked nearby.
Why would you think that a poison meant to blind people, meant to make people's tear ducts have reactive issues, would just be fine after it dissipates?
Liv Vasquez did not attend the protest, but lived in southeast Portland. She said officers used tear gas in her neighborhood and a mile away in downtown. She said breathing in the gas caused changes to her menstrual cycle and an intense pain.
Where I was literally doubling over and feeling like I need to lay down or be in a ball, basically, because I was having such bad cramps. And I had never experienced menstrual pain like this before. And I've had cramps before, but nothing like this. And to have the spotting as well was really concerning to me.
Liv moved 10 miles away and said the cramping and spotting stopped.
And I noticed pretty quickly that I was starting to feel better.
You could tell they used a lot of tear gas down there.
Jen Moondancer said she was also exposed, not at a protest, but by being downtown.
I could definitely smell it in the air outside in the Pearl District and downtown. I'm very familiar with the scent. I went, a gas chamber training in the military a few times.
The Army veteran was going to school 3 days a week in downtown Portland last summer, where the protests often ended in a cloud of tear gas each night.
My cycle would get much heavier. I would bleed profusely. The pain was extreme, and I would get really bad headaches. which was something I didn't really get before.
Jen, who also has some other health issues, ended up getting a hysterectomy. She's feeling better, but wonders why tear gas is still being used on city streets.
It is something that is used during war. It is not a war. So why are they using it? It's really sad to me.
Researchers at Kaiser Permanente Center for Health Research in Portland heard these same complaints and wanted to study the impacts of tear gas on the general population.
The most research that we have on tear gas is from many years ago and often conducted by the military and mostly on healthy men is the majority of the population.
Britta Torgrimson-Ohario was the lead researcher on the largest tear gas study of its kind. Kaiser surveyed more than 2,000 people of various ages and health conditions about what tear gas had done to them. 2,200 people responded. 94% reported a health impact. More than 1,200 people sought health care after coming in contact with tear gas.
Another key finding, very important finding, was menstrual irregularities that were published. So of people that could potentially menstruate or had a uterus, more than half, 54.5% of those people reported some change. So biggest changes reported were heavy cramping, unusual spotting and bleeding, or increased bleeding.
People also reported feeling these effects days or weeks after breathing it in, which she said goes against the common narrative that tear gas only affects you in that moment.
There were things that didn't start really occurring until a day or two after even. Severe headaches, gastrointestinal issues for people, brain fog, fatigue, and then, of course, the reports of menstrual changes.
Torgrimson-Ohario hopes this is the first of many studies to really understand what tear gas can do to the body.
We feel like this report from Portland is really a call to action for all of the scientific community to engage in better understanding what are these chemical compounds that were being used, how are they potentially impacting people's health.
Oregon lawmakers have introduced legislation to restrict tear gas and other riot control munitions. If passed, local and state law enforcement could only use tear gas if physical force is justified.
I mean, this is Portland, where we weren't even salting the roads like 3 or 4 years ago when we had a huge snowstorm because of the environmental impact. So you're worried about the fish and the runoff. How are you not concerned about a poison or what it has on health impacts of the environment and the people living in this environment? Like, this was an assault on the city of Portland as a whole, regardless of if you were out protesting, regardless of if you were downtown. If you were in your home, like me, you were a victim of this assault.
Kristen Severance, KGW News.
Now, if you've been watching this show for a while, then you know I've been tear gassed. I spent a few nights covering the protests and the riots last summer, and I got gassed by federal agents outside of the Justice Center downtown. I want to show you a tweet, though, that I sent a few hours before that happened, before the gas canisters started flying that night. You see, the gas leaves a powder behind. That's what you see on the lid of that grill in the picture on the left there. I wrote, "You can still feel the CS gas from last night. Itches your throat, makes your nose run under your mask." Let me tell you, being in that park, breathing that in, that dust, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to be a doctor to figure out that the stuff just can't be good for you. That said, the city did still send in some experts once the dust cleared, so to speak, to assess how things went. Now, last summer, Environmental Services, they checked the storm drains, and they found all kind of nasty stuff that you don't want in our rivers. All right, they found elevated levels of barium, of copper, lead, and zinc at the federal courthouse site. And I know what you're thinking. Elevated levels of chemicals can't be great for our rivers, and you are right. But according to BES, we must say that the chemicals can pop up in urban environments, but they were a lot bigger there in those areas than in some control areas surrounding the Justice Center.
Now, the good news here, those, quote, elevated chemical readings never did actually reach the Willamette because of some filtration systems we had. The city did, though, they had to clean out 6 storm drains, and they hit the feds with a $20,000 fine because of this. They also installed some filtration systems on storm drains near the Justice Center and the ICE building to keep pollutants out of the river. But we still don't know how that gas or that powder impacted the soil or the plants or the animals in those parks that were gassed nightly for weeks. Now, imagine that same story with those same concerns, but instead of a park downtown or a justice center, we're talking about a school with kids, the one right next to the ICE facility. Families there have been pleading for the gas to go, and so far, those pleas have been unanswered. I want to play the first part of a story that our reporter Mike Benner did for us a few weeks ago in mid-April.
Monday was a big day at the Cottonwood School in Portland's South Waterfront. It was the first day of in-person classes in months.
It's still really scary. It's really, really scary.
It's not COVID that parent Kate Sheriff is worried about. It's this. All of this and much more has been found in the school's outdoor play area.
Honestly, it's really heartbreaking to me to think of the contamination that's in that soil.
The Cottonwood School sits right next door to the ICE building, the scene of so many protests over the last year, including this past weekend. Munitions that federal agents use to disperse crowds end up right on the Cottonwood School property. The school's executive director says schools should be chemical weapons-free zones.
Should schools be chemical weapon-free zones? Is that a crazy question? Because still tonight, that school isn't one. So, how did we get here? Tear gas was developed as a weapon during World War I to force troops out of the trenches, but it was later banned in warfare under the Geneva Protocol of 1925. Around that same time, the military marketed the gas to police for riot and crowd control purposes. It's been used ever since during demonstrations like labor strikes, Vietnam War protests, and the Civil Rights Movement. Fast forward to May 2020, when Portland police used it during protests in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. In June, the group Don't Shoot PDX sued Portland over the Bureau's use of tear gas. A federal judge ruled in their favor and issued a temporary restraining order on PPB using tear gas. The only exception was if there was a risk to public or police safety. But that order didn't apply to federal police, who continued to gas protesters last summer outside of the federal courthouse. In July, Governor Kate Brown signed a bill banning tear gas, except when police declare a riot. Well, Portland police kept declaring riots and kept using it. So in September, Mayor Ted Wheeler banned the police bureau from using tear gas. Now, state lawmakers are considering a new bill that would ban police from using tear gas unless physical force is also justified. But again, this wouldn't stop federal agents from using tear gas. And that's how we got here. Okay. Now, hey, we have a pretty significant update for you on a story that we've been covering this week. The Multnomah County District Attorney announced today that the police shooting death of Israel Berry will go before a grand jury once and for all, and a private criminal defense lawyer will serve as co-prosecutor. If you're a little lost here, I don't blame you. I want to catch you up real quick. It's been almost a year now since a Gresham police officer shot and killed Berry in southeast Portland. It happened on May 31st, right in the thick of the protests after George Floyd's death. And this story here, the shooting barely made any headlines. Only a few details have actually ever been released about it. Friends of Berry and several witnesses, they're frustrated that unlike other police shootings, investigators haven't released photos or recordings or police reports. And it's not entirely clear why the DA's office has taken so long to present this case to a grand jury. Typically, these investigations take about a month and a half, not a year. I spoke with investigative reporter Kyle Aboshi about what happens next.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi. Kyle, big development today after some good reporting from you. Do we know much about this timeline, though, when we're going to start seeing things happening?
We're told about 3 to 5 weeks before the grand jury hears the case. Remember, this is a secret panel, so the testimony is private. The findings, though, will be made public after that review is complete.
The magic question, though, the one everyone's still wondering is why? Why has it taken this long?
That's our big question, and honestly, we don't have an answer at this point. Multnomah County DA Mike Schmidt wasn't available for an interview today. I am told, though, behind the scenes, there have been a lot of moving parts. Schmidt came into office just as the investigation was wrapping up. His office tried to work informally with the AG's office, but something happened there. There was some kind of split. We don't have all the details just yet. Then in March, he appointed this special prosecutor, which we're just now learning about. But again, to answer your question, we don't really know why this case has taken so long compared to others.
What do we know about this special prosecutor, and why bring this person in?
Yeah, his name is Sam Kaufman. He's a private criminal defense lawyer, has been for quite some time here in Portland. It's the first time that a special prosecutor has been appointed to review a police shooting in Multnomah County. Schmidt's office says it removes any possible conflict of interest by having an outsider take a look at the case.
Understood. All right, Kyle Eboshi, thank you.
It kind of feels like we're on a pandemic roller coaster. We close, we open, we reclose, we reopen. My question is, how do we get off this thing? When the story continues.
Welcome back. I was just going through some tweets and emails. I got a couple I want to address. In fact, I got a lot of similar ones that I want to talk about right at the end of the show. But if you have some opinions, anything you want us to talk about or discuss, some critiques you have on our coverage, please let me know. Use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. You can also find me on Facebook, email us, lots of ways to let us hear what's on your mind. Now, if you missed it, all 15 Oregon counties in extreme risk are now moving back into high risk starting on Friday. And that means that indoor dining can open back up after it was shut down for a week, which I imagine kind of feels like whiplash to these restaurant owners who are already struggling. I got this comment from Lisa on my Facebook page. She said, "We do own a bar in Multnomah County. We closed, cleaned out the fridges, and gave away all the food, assuming we'd be closed for a good 3 weeks. Now, back at the store this morning, because I'm sure we're not the only ones shopping, rebuying all the food. Definitely a roller coaster ride that I want off of." See, Lisa and her husband Patrick, they own the Old Barn in Southwest Portland. And I spoke to him earlier today about how they're scrambling to get everything ready to reopen now.
This sort of on and on again, off again notion just doesn't work. You know, I'm not sure that the people that are making those decisions really understand what goes into running a business. I know they're running the state, but I think that's a different animal. And just the notion of being able to turn a light switch on and think things are going to be great just isn't how it works. And supply chain becomes a huge issue. I went to 4 different places today just to buy a variety of products to try and make sure we have everything I think our customers are going to ask for when we open on Friday.
Okay, Pat Dorse, catch us up to speed here, because we hear from restaurant owners and suppliers and distributors every night, people who are over it, this roller coaster ride, and they're not very confident in what is going to happen next. They feel totally unsure. So do we have any assurities of moving forward as far as the governor's plan?
Well, there's no assurance, but there is a framework. So she has these different levels, with extreme risk being the highest. And I think that now that she's moved all the counties out of that, at least for right now, she's going to be watching the numbers, the hospitalizations, the new infection rates, all that kind of stuff, with the hope that we've sort of plateaued because of the vaccinations and that these things will start to trend down. I think the hospitalizations today were about 15 less than they were yesterday. So that is an encouraging sign. But you're right, there's no guarantees. And when I asked the governor's office specifically today, has high risk gone away? They dodged my question, basically blew me off, gave me some talking points about vaccination rates and blah, blah, blah. They expect things to continue to go well. They wouldn't talk about if they don't.
They gave you the long version of the word no. The extreme risk category has not gone away, right? You know, that said, moving forward, and we've covered this many times, there are a lot of people in this state who don't intend to get this vaccine. And we know that those people are going to continue to get sick, and people are going to continue to go to the hospital, and there are going to be various things that come up over time that cause spikes to happen. And I assume it's very possible we could go back into extreme risk, despite the fact that the vaccine is widely available to everyone who would like to get it right now.
Yeah, that is technically absolutely correct. That high-risk category is still there. The statewide metrics are still there. Now, I will say the nice thing about being the governor in the pandemic, there's probably not very many things for her that's nice about all this, is that she's sort of the top of the food chain. So she can decide to change the rules at any time. She might tell us tomorrow high risk is gone and we're not going back. But right now, it is there. And I think what the experts are hoping is that eventually this becomes like the seasonal flu. Some people refuse to get vaccinated, they get sick, the rest of us are okay, and that the vaccine is available for everybody. So we'll wait and see on that one.
Yeah, I think some people have been wondering if Governor Brown would kind of have a reassess the way that she is looking at these metrics. Have you heard anything about that being part of the way she's thinking moving forward, or are we just unsure?
Yeah, unsure. It's hard to get into the inner circle. It's hard to get kind of one-on-one time with the governor. I haven't, we ask like every week, hey, can we do a one-on-one interview? We haven't had anything for a few months now, which I get. I mean, the legislature's in session. She's a little bit busy. She's the top executive in the entire state, and the government is huge. I'm sure she's just hoping for the best and cannot wait until this is all done.
Yeah. Well, I think we can all agree with that. Pat, thank you, sir.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right, let's do our daily vaccine count, shall we? More than 1.94 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose of the vaccine. The majority of these people have also gotten their second dose, but it puts us at a nice percentage. Look, 46.2% of people in Oregon with at least one shot. In Washington, more than 3.65 million have gotten at least their first dose. That works out to be about 48% of the state's population. Now, if you got questions about vaccines, I'm sure you do, or how this is all working out right now, let me know with the hashtag #HeyDan. We got a whole team dedicated to the vaccine rollout. As you heard, Pat is an expert himself at this point. I'll send your questions their way. I'm going to read some of your comments when we finish the story, right after this. We're going to get to comments in just a second, but first, have you heard about our giant QR code? There it is. It's almost as big as me. This is what you point your phone at with the camera on, and that will take you to a link for our newsletter, which apparently people really like. We keep getting, I keep getting all these internal emails of my bosses saying people really like the newsletter. Keep pitching it. So here I am pitching it. If you would like it, it tells you all the stuff that we've been doing throughout the week, kind of a bunch of highlights, some of the stuff that didn't quite make air. If you are on that list, if you're getting it already, let us know what you think about it. Reach out using the hashtag #HeyDan. If you'd like to be on it, use the QR code. Check out the newsletter. You can always unsubscribe if you don't like it, but I think you're going to like it. All right, let's get to some comments. All about tear gas. All right, Michelle. Hey, Dan. Don't do anything wrong, and there's nothing to worry about with tear gas. I'm not sure if you watched the whole story, but that's not the case. In fact, we were talking to people who never went to a protest, never went to a riot, and they were caught up in this tear gas situation, right? Because the tear gas was being fired in neighborhoods. Somebody else writing in on Twitter. Why does no one seem to blame the rioters for choosing residential areas to do their rioting for the collateral damage caused by their actions? Blame them all you want. Blame them. Blame away. Go right ahead. But we don't set policy for rioters. We set laws and rules for society. But as we have seen over, all of human history, that doesn't eliminate people from pushing those boundaries or breaking those rules and laws. So we can't legislate, we don't call together the protesters and say, here's what you should be doing. But we can do that with our government bodies, with our police, right? I mean, blame away. Blame all you'd like. I got a bunch of people saying that same thing. Blame the protesters, not the police. Blame the protesters, not the police. Feel free. Blame whoever you like. We're talking about people who are in their houses and are dealing with the reactions from tear gas. By the way, was being fired night after night after night after night. Keep the info. Let me know what you think about what I just said, please. We want to continue this conversation. Use the hashtag #HeyDan. That's the story for tonight. Use that huge QR code if you'd like. I'll see you back here tomorrow.